to the Ideas Without Frontiers podcast series, Visionary Voices. This podcast is brought to you by the Cascade Foundation. We are committed to helping educational institutions become more globally connected, to help them overcome the barriers they face and deliver real transformative change. If you want to know more about our foundation and learn about our community of action, you can visit our website at cascade-foundation.eu. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hi, my name is Mark Majewski-Anderson. I'm from the Cascade Foundation. I've been working in international education for a number of years. Anyway, I'm very pleased to have with us today Stephen Paterson, who works at the National University of Management in Cambodia. So, Steve, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here.
So I've known you for some years, Steve, but I think you've been in Cambodia for years. Could you just explain a little bit how you managed to get over to Cambodia in the first place? What were your reasons? I think you're from Canada originally, is that right?
Yeah, correct. Originally from Toronto, Canada. So it was actually when I was doing graduate studies in Toronto, and I was very active working with refugees in Toronto. And so I was looking for an opportunity to go abroad to see the refugee experience from the other country perspective. Initially, I was actually thinking of Central America because I was doing volunteer work with Jesuit Refugee Service, with Oxfam, with Amnesty International. And when I applied, there was nothing in Central America, but as coincidence happened, there was a Jesuit priest from Australia who was in charge, based in Bangkok, in charge of the refugee camps for Cambodians, which were located on the Thai-Cambodian border. And he said, we have a position that is for 2 years, 3 months in the education sector, working in refugee camps. And I said, okay. And then I went through a larger sort of, process of onboarding and that they did on the Canadian side. So in many ways, it was an accident. I could have been at any other country in the world, and my life could have been taken a completely different track. So I ended up going there, also co-funded by CUSO, which is maybe VSO is the British equivalent of CUSO. So it was a co-share, a number of different organizations sponsoring my my trip and, basically living stipend, because it was pretty modest when you're working in a refugee camp. And I was working in a camp for 200,000 refugees that had a full education system. So my job was basically teacher training, working with high school teachers to make sure that they were, more effective in the classroom, that they had up-to-date curricula for teaching history, geography, social science, a little bit of journalism. And so that's how I got connected to Cambodia. And in terms of my work here at the university, I've been here since 1994. Initially, it was through USAID and Georgetown University. A position opened up in 1994 to teach small business. Today, what we would probably call entrepreneurship. And so I ended up getting hired by Georgetown, and that was a USAID grant program. And that's how I got connected to the National University of Management back in 1994. So this is actually my 30th year here at the university.
Wow. So you were in Thailand on the border in the refugee camps, really right at the end of the civil war and the beginning of the transformation of Cambodia. So you've seen massive changes, I guess, over there.
Correct. I was there 89 to 92, and then the UN peacekeeping sort of came in at that point. I ended up going back for graduate studies in Canada for about a year or two, and then coming in 94. So I missed some of the UN presence here, but I saw the before and I saw the after, and I've obviously seen and witnessed tremendous change.
Yeah, is it possible, because it's so massive? Is it possible for you to describe what that change has been, especially in higher education? I mean, has it gone really from zero? How has it evolved?
Well, I think things are never zero, right? There's always something going on the ground, right, that precedes the your involvement. But certainly there's been major changes. Education is something very much valued in Cambodian or Khmer society. People, certainly back then worked very, very hard to get that education. And yeah, obviously, there's been so many changes in the economy, in the society, in terms of technology. So yes, over that period, a lot has happened, right? And of course now we like any other university around the world, we had ChatGPT, we have all the latest that is coming in terms of the tech side and having to deal with those issues. But yeah, it's been quite the transition. When I first came here, it was listening to BBC World Service on a shortwave radio, right? So there's been a lot of change over that period.
So what about the National University of Management? Can you describe a little bit the different faculties and your position in it, and how has that changed over the years specifically?
Okay, so right now we are 14,000 students. We are a public university. We are located in the heart of the city, so the central part of Phnom Penh, the capital. Yeah, I mean, it's changed in terms of numbers. When I first started, it was maybe a couple of thousand, maybe 1,000 or 2,000. So it's grown tremendously. My role has always been in entrepreneurship. I mean, right now, as of my title is Vice Rector of the university with a focus on entrepreneurship and innovation. But throughout those years, my focus has mostly been on entrepreneurship. So my title has certainly increased. So as of January 1st this year, I just assumed the Vice Rector title, which would be, I guess not every country has the rector, vice rector type concept, but in the US, that would be probably like a vice president would be the best way to describe that title. But again, my focus has always been, and passion has always been on entrepreneurship and education over those 30 years.
So, of course, we met in a project called Southeast Asian Social Innovation Network, which was really trying to introduce social innovation hubs into the university. And I know that you had some fantastic success in the National University of Management establishing a hub. Can you describe a little bit about that and the experience of how that has been developed?
Sure. So I think I'm trying to remember when we started. That project would have been, what, 2016, 2017, it was launched. And part of that requirement, and that was an EU-funded project, was that each university would create what we call here our social innovation lab. And even though the funding has ended, I am right now speaking from our social innovation lab at the university. And we are very active here. So because of the EU funding, it was great to give us this sort of idea to launch this innovation center, this innovation lab. So what do we do here? It's basically the heart of our undergraduate and graduate programs in entrepreneurship and innovation, including social innovation. But we also use the lab as a place to experiment. This is where we try out new ideas, and they could be new academic ideas. They could be running new programs, doing something innovative in terms of how we design the program or a new course, launch it. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. So to me, the lab is a place to experiment. We also run competitions here. We have lean startup competitions that we run nationally and regionally here at the iLab. So it's really a place not just for entrepreneurship and innovation, but to explore new ideas, to experiment, to innovate.
Fantastic. So obviously CSIN was an international project, but how in general does internationalization work within the university, and how do you view it as a university professional and the benefits that it can bring to the universities in Cambodia?
Okay, so I mean, obviously we might have different perspectives, but from our perspective, we want to go global, right? Whether it's international or global, whatever the term. So how do we do that? We do this through programs like CSIN, and we have other active EU-funded Erasmus programs right now. We do this with student mobility. In March of this year, we will have 7 students coming in from France, from our partners in Lyon Business School, from ESCA, from ICN University in Nancy, France. And we have students now in France. So we have students right now in all of those locations in France, basically through bilateral agreements with those universities. We also work with the Erasmus project, Erasmus Mobility. So we have students in Poland and Lithuania. We send students to Japan, to, you name it, Singapore. So basically also the United States, University of Wisconsin, we have a dual degree program with them. So basically our goal is to get students out of the country. We also welcome international students here because we think that those cultural exchanges are important. But generally, I find that when our students get out of the country, whether for one semester, for 1 year, for short-term experience, it changes their perspective, right? It opens them up to being maybe more ambitious, to having higher objectives in their own career and life. So I think it's a big, from curiosity, it just opens up their imagination. So I'm a big believer in mobility, right? Our students going out, international students coming in, but obviously research projects, grant programs are part of that. We also currently have a large USAID program that we're working with University of California, Berkeley. So that's also very important for us, and it allows us to send faculty to Berkeley and receive faculty from Berkeley here. So I think every aspect on the research, on the faculty exchange, but for me, mostly the student exchange is a big part of this internationalization of education.
This is really inspirational. I mean, is this been something that you've been instrumental in achieving? Is it across the university? Do you think the advantage of you being Canadian has helped in building up internationalization in the university? Give us an idea of how that's worked.
Okay, that's a good question. I think being Canadian always helps. You're semi-close to the US, but also close to Europe and France and the UK. You have that sort of neutral, I guess, category. But yeah, so I think, I guess that's part of it. But a lot of it is just not being afraid to reach out. I mean, one of my mantras is I always ask, right? Whether I'm trying to get faculty coming in to teach, whether I'm trying to get guest speakers on our online programs. I'm always reaching out to people, authors of books, people who've also done podcasts from the US, to try to see if we can get them on a Zoom call as a guest speaker session. Because actually, NUM Social Innovation Lab, we also have a YouTube channel where we post some of our talks with different speakers from around the world. We started that actually during COVID, right, as a way to reach out. And one of the lessons I learned from COVID was that why limit ourselves to human resources in Cambodia? I realized that when we were doing the teaching on Zoom, that we could have people teaching from other countries as long as the time zones lined up. And we've continued that. So right now I have a Cambodian who is based in Chicago in the finance industry, who teaches an online course for us. I had someone from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, teaching an online leadership course. We are reaching out to, we had someone teaching from Singapore. So right now I realize that, physical class is always best, but we can mix some physical, some online, especially if we can get a more interesting faculty member to come and deliver a course. So basically a lot of what I try to do is just reaching out. If I get no, I always say to people, if someone tells me no, it's a private no. No one knows I asked. So only I know that I fail. But if I get a yes, everyone knows it's a success because I have a course, I have a speaker, I have something to share.
Yeah.
So it's just getting this idea of network, right? Network is so important in what we do, and it creates so many opportunities. So, but you have to have that openness to help people in your network also. It's a little bit of give and take. You can't always be asking. You have to think of what other people might be looking for, making sure they're getting something out of the process. But yes, I just reach out, and I'm not afraid to, to ask for someone to come, especially when it's not for me, it's for our students, it's for our university, it's, the beneficiary is somewhere else.
And that's a really good tip for any country, a university that's feeling isolated, that wants to reach out and to become more international is really zero resource and really effective. You've had some interesting experiences as well with face-to-face mobility, and I know that two members of the Cascade Foundation representing their own universities came over and delivered quite an interesting program. Can you describe a little bit about that experience? I think it was quite an intensive time.
That was. So it was just last summer. We had a 2-week basically summer program focusing on entrepreneurship, design thinking, and systems thinking, and also cultural intelligence. And it was 120 international students plus faculty. So we had 30 from the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, plus faculty members, 30 students from University of Amsterdam, in addition to select faculty. The same from the University of Sydney, Australia, and also Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. When we added in our students, it was like 150 plus faculty members, and it was a 2-week summer program. A lot of guest speakers, a lot of entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs coming to speak to the students with a full academic program, field visits. That was a great experience. I mean, to have all the students come together from different countries, from different parts of the world, working with our students, working to solve problems, using design thinking approach. This is what, this is part of internationalization of education. I'm a big believer in these type of programs. Since that program, NTU in Singapore has reached out to us for a private summer program that we're still discussing with them right now. We hope to also join the upcoming Insight program in Da Nang by sending some of our students and faculty later this year. So suddenly now summer programs, designing these programs where we bring together students from different countries and faculty from different countries. And of course, it helps build relationships. So, we also had a chance to visit University of Edinburgh as part of the planning process for that. My father is actually originally from Aberdeen, Scotland, so it was great going back to Scotland in some ways from the family perspective. So I really enjoyed that opportunity to connect, and of course also working with your university in Glasgow, which is very well known in terms of the social innovation and social entrepreneurship that you're focusing on. So these have been great opportunities.
No, it's brilliant to hear, and I think that there's something very interesting about bringing students together from different cultures, and obviously, the Cambodian culture is incredibly rich, and the history of Cambodia is extraordinary, and Angkor Wat and the history of the different empires that have existed there. And that, I mean, I'm sure that, like me, the Cambodian people and food and etc. is extraordinarily rich. When you see students coming together with their counterparts from Australia, from the Netherlands, UK, etc., how do they interact? And what's the dynamic between them? Do you see it as quite challenging for them? How does it manifest itself?
No, I would say our top students are very competitive globally, right? So, for example, when our students go to Europe, I often hear back that, wow, they are really good at presentations, because we drill that in as part of our program. We do a lot of teamwork here. Everyone has to present almost every class. And so they come back and they say, well, the European students are very introverted and they're not really good at presentation. They're using PowerPoint. We're using, Canva and other more creative online platforms to develop slides. So I just find that quite fascinating. I find that, when our students go abroad, a lot of students from other countries don't know much about Cambodia. They have low expectations. So I had one of my students who had the Fulbright master's program to Northeastern, which is one of the top universities in Boston. And she was studying actually engineering at the master level on alternative energy. And she said no one sort of wanted to be in her study group because they're like, Cambodia, they sort of question the potential she said her professor wasn't so engaged. And then after the first test, she had the #1 score. And then suddenly the professor sort of looked at her in a different light. And suddenly everyone wanted to be having her in the study group, right? And so that is often the perspective. We send a lot of students to the UK through the Chevening Scholarship Program, to the US through Fulbright, I guess Australian awards scholarship. And usually these students, now these are top tier students, right? That's the top percentage, but they shine, right? They're quite outgoing, they engage. So I think a lot of people are always surprised because they have low expectations for the country. And I think our people, our students easily surpass those expectations and they're performing quite well. And sometimes they will have opinions of the other students too, which is interesting, right? That I will get that feedback, right? In terms of discipline, I think our students have more discipline in terms of focus on work. They are less distracted by other parts of culture, maybe compared to European students or North American students. But they're very committed. And I guess this comes from their background. And, when you're coming from a developing country, education is serious. And so I sense some of those differences. But generally, they perform well. I'm never worried about sending our students abroad. I just assume that they're going to surpass the expectation of whatever that is on the receiving country.
No, it's an interesting thing. I guess it's really one of the drivers of the Cascade Foundation, this idea that there's a real untapped resource in countries around the world who don't get that opportunity to show themselves and their true potential, and are kind of are trapped. I mean, you've done a lot of work clearly in making this happen. Do you see it happening widely in other Cambodian universities, or is this still a challenge?
No, I think there's tremendous change across the educational landscape here. Everyone wants to become more international. I think, a lot is happening in the education space. The Ministry of Education is doing a great job with this new generation schools. So at the high school level, they've created this, within the public school system, a school within a school. I think in the US, they might use the term charter school. People have different perspectives on this type of system, but it's basically creating many better, higher standards, better quality teachers, and it's making a big difference because I can see that at the university side. So I think one of the nice things about Cambodia is it's very open to experimentation. We have some amazing initiatives happening. There's a really great program called Liger Leadership Academy, which is also this high school here that is funded, that has a wealthy international donor behind him. But they select students from the province, from disadvantaged backgrounds, but everything is project-based learning. Every subject has a project. And as a result, most of them go on to study in university in the United States and abroad, right? They get full scholarship. So the government here is very open to experimentation. And I think that is important. And they recognize these programs. They don't say, well, okay, it's not our public program, so we will not recognize you. So it's a very healthy ecosystem. And then success stories can be strengthened, and some of what they do can be spread to the public school system. So I think we're in a very open type of education structure here. Compared to other countries, which are maybe more top-down bureaucratic, Cambodia is quite open. So and that's why I enjoy working here, because you can try new ideas. You're not discouraged, right? And so I like that idea to try new things and just see what works and to make change and to do it quite quickly also.
So that's a very positive outlook, and it's very refreshing because, obviously nowadays we feel like we're facing this kind of multi-crises around the world, etc. How do you see the future? I mean, your hopes and your fears for the future? Do you look at a positive trajectory for Cambodia and for the region? How do you see it?
Well, just talking about Cambodia, I think one of the great things is we have such a young government now. And so if you look at most of the ministers in the new government, they're in their 40s. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And having that youthful, and a lot of them have studied abroad, right? So that means that they've been exposed to international education. They know the standard in other countries. Our new prime minister went to West Point Military Academy in the US, which I think builds a strong character in values, in addition to other graduate education, I think, in US and UK. Others have gone to the Kennedy School at Harvard. So when you see them on the world stage next to leaders that are maybe sometimes like in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, I think it's amazing, that now we are the young country on the block, and we have all of this sort of energy to make change. So I'm very optimistic now that we have this much younger cabinet who is very reform-minded, who basically know the gaps between what is happening, between the situation in other countries and here. So I'm very positive that we're going to see more and more reforms, more and more changes, not just in education, but hopefully also the economy, the startup ecosystem. So I'm quite positive in terms of what is happening in Cambodia. I won't comment on world geopolitics. That's much more challenging.
Yes.
But at least here we're in a bit more of a quieter part of the world. So obviously we still have to balance, between rivals, international rivals. But I think Cambodia has a lot of history in doing that, and so far we seem to be balancing that quite well.
Brilliant. And is there to a certain extent, as Cambodia gains confidence, it also gains its own identity more, and doesn't really kind of try to mimic other countries or other systems?
It's a great question. I hope so, right? We will see, but I think that people are trying to come up with new ideas, including the Ministry of Tourism, new strategies to promote the country so that people know more about Cambodia. Tourism still has not recovered to pre-COVID levels, so there are challenges, but they're investing in infrastructure in places like Siem Reap, where Angkor Wat is. So I think there's a lot of, but I think they're also looking at the strategy of, okay, what other countries, learning from the best practices from other countries in the world, how they promoted some of their destinations. So I think there's a real commitment to trying to come up with new ideas, and also to make sure that things are done in a sustainable manner, in a social manner. So it's not just about profit, but it's also about taking care of the of the tourism ecosystem also.
Well, I mean, in a sense, from everything you've said, it's almost like Cambodia is a model for other countries around the world to do it right. Certainly in terms of internationalization, higher education.
Well, I always say that we should, obviously there's room for improvement. And I always say in terms of economies, we should be trying to learn from other smaller countries, whether Singapore, but also places like Estonia, where they have e-government and have done some amazing things in opening up their economy to the outside. But yeah, in terms of education, I mean, we have, like, Britain just opened its first UK campus here a month ago, right? It's the Montfort University. It's the first British campus in Cambodia. That is their tagline. We do have other, like American University of Phnom Penh, that has a program with Arizona. We ourselves at the National University of Management have a dual degree with the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, that we just signed last year. So we can do like a 3+1, where students can do 3 years here and then 1 year in the US. And there are other universities here in the ecosystem that are also trying to do similar programs. Things are quite open for international partnerships, whether like 3+1, 2+2, student mobility, a lot is happening. We're also focusing on Australia now. So our university has just been listed as like tier 1, which allows us to do 3+1 programs with universities in Australia. So we're getting a lot of universities in Australia reaching out to us. Japan has always been on our area of engagement for student mobility. We will be having some Japanese students join our undergraduate program here next year. So I love that, to see the foreign students come here, sitting in our classrooms, whether it's from France or from Japan. That is very interesting to see, right? It's not just us going out, but also, coming in from Western and developed countries. I think this is also a great trend.
Yeah, it's a game changer. Well, listen, we're coming towards the end of this podcast. You are really inspirational. I genuinely mean that. I think what you've achieved has been fantastic. You must feel, so pleased seeing how it's developed in Cambodia. What about the future for you? How do you see yourself continuing? Because you've achieved so much. Is there a lot more you want to achieve, or do you feel, right, it's time to retire and go to down south to the coast and sip rum by the sea?
No, I mean, I do not believe in retirement. I'm one of these guys that, I love what I do, so I will still continue because our programs are still active. I have a lot of freedom to introduce new ideas and make adjustments in programs and launch new programs, which I love. And I get positive, feedback from students and from other people that we work in. So no, I'm a big believer that you just keep on moving forward. And we are actually young. If you look at, who some of the people running in politics these days, they're a couple of decades above, right? I think in today's world, you see people that are active very late in life. And I think if I looked at my own career, I'm very much a late bloomer. And I think there's a lot of late bloomers. Success comes in much later in life. And so I'm enjoying that period now. And so I plan to be here as long as I'm physically able. And I mean, obviously it's about impact. So as long as I feel that I'm making a contribution, that there's, some impact, this is what keeps me going.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, thanks ever so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been really inspiring, and good luck with new projects and more internationalization at NUM. Thank you.
And thank you, Mark. And I very much hope that we will continue to work in the near future together on some new projects. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Sure. Thanks a lot.